Chilling tales for dark nights.
By Sakinah Jonas-Mawji, narrated by James Cleveland.
Every now and then, I think of that night, back when we were still at school. I was studying sciences and you were doing business studies. We used to joke that when we finished school I would open my own laboratory and be the mad scientist, and you would be the office manager in the short skirts and glasses. You really rocked your glasses. Sometimes I still think back to when we decided to go camping for 5 days that winter, to prove you could cope on your own without your mother doing your laundry and cooking your food for you during vacation. Proving we were adults and could take care of ourselves. The irony of it isn't lost on me. It's so stark that sometimes I almost want to laugh out loud. We really thought we knew everything. Teenage rebellion, we thought we created it. At 19, I think we thought we created the world, or at least improved upon it. God, it was so cold that winter. I only agreed to go because you wanted to, and I thought you would think less of me if I said no. I didn't want you to think I was afraid or too precious to join you in making your statement. I remember you lived with your mom. God knows where your dad was. You always said you didn't care. But maybe if you'd had a stable home life, you wouldn't have needed to prove yourself, and we wouldn't have needed to go camping. I sure as hell had nothing to prove. I was just a poor little rich kid with no family to prove anything to anymore. I just did what you asked me to because I would have done anything for you. I still would. I remember sitting on my bed after we got off the phone, wondering what the hell I had just agreed to, and knowing that because I'd said yes, I couldn't backtrack and say no. You would never have forgiven me. I hated camping. No clean water, having to use the wilderness as a bathroom and hoping that nobody chooses that moment to walk past and see me taking a leak. Not being able to shower. The bugs and spiders that always want to welcome you into their territory. Semi-warm, half-cooked food, because campfires in rainstorms really do only blaze in movies. I went camping as a kid with my dad just the once. Neither of us ever wanted to repeat that vacation. It was a horrible experience. My dad tried so hard to make it fun. We dug a fire pit in the mud and gathered wood and leaves, but they wouldn't burn because they were too wet. We had a couple of rambles through the woods. I guess so we could say we tried, but we got soaked to the skin and covered in mud. It was just miserable, and in the end we spent the remainder of the time in our tent, wrapped in our sleeping bags, reading, drawing and playing word games until we could return home again a few days later, without my mother's knowing smile that said, "I told you so," without her ever uttering a single word. I think maybe I'm a lot like my dad in many ways. He would have done anything for my mother. That's why, when she finally died of the cancer that had been eating her up for 7 painful months, he gave up and died soon after her. He spent his whole life living for her. She could have asked for anything, and he would have done it for her. Childhood sweethearts. I guess that's why I don't believe in giving up on a relationship, however difficult it may be. I always believed we could find a way to make it work. When my mother was finally gone, I guess Dad forgot that he had a kid to carry on for, and he let the misery take him. I was so hurt when he died, so angry that they had both abandoned me. My mother, I could understand, she was sick and couldn't help it. Even the doctors couldn't save her. But my father, he just gave up, like I wasn't important. He laid down one night a month after she died and never got back up. The doctors called it broken heart syndrome, where an emotional trauma causes the victim to suffer a sudden rush of stress hormones, paralyzing the heart muscles. He died in his sleep. I was 17 years old. I stayed living in the house I grew up in. It reminded me of them and the memories we had shared. I had nowhere else to go, and they left me the house, which was paid for, and more money than I would have ever been able to spend, so I just stayed there. I spent long hours alone in the family mausoleum talking to my parents, sometimes crying, and other times shouting my pain out to them. You helped me through that time. You made it possible for me to stay strong where others would have probably crumbled. You were there for me, right where I needed you, by my side, so to speak. I really can't thank you enough. Your camping trip idea distracted me from everything I had lost and reminded me I still had you. You were so determined about going camping that I knew I would have to go with you. I loved you then. I would follow you to the ends of the earth over burning hot coals and broken glass to prove my love for you if I had to. Camping, I guess, was a small price. I loved how fiery you used to get when you were upset about something. I know that sounds weird because I didn't want you to be upset about anything. But when you were so damn sexy. So, camping it was. I stood there and looked around my room before pulling my backpack out from under my bed and opening my sock drawer. I pulled out my thickest socks and dropped them into the open bag. I would probably need to wear 2 pairs at a time. It was that cold, and I hated being cold. I found my favorite underwear, and then went about packing my warmest clothing. I also packed a few basic toiletries, remembering that there would only be bottled water and a full wash would only be possible on our return. I made a list of foodstuffs we would need and then headed out to the store. I bought chocolate, powdered milk, coffee, bottled water, candy bars, potato chips, cups of noodles you add hot water to, and cereal bars. We needed convenience food. Feel-good food, my dad always called it. I loaded up my car with a few grocery bags and then headed to the mall. I found the camp gear store and started looking through what they had. I still had the tent from when I went camping as a kid, but I wasn't going to rely on my non-existent survival skills this time. I bought a portable cooking fire so we could still eat hot food even if the heavens opened and rained down on us. Some reliable firelighters, sleeping bags, thermal socks, rain ponchos so we stayed dry if we went exploring. I picked up a couple of sporks so we wouldn't have to carry loads of cutlery, and a lantern, a couple of small flashlights, and some batteries. 5 days would be a long time. It was cold and we were going to be away from all of our creature comforts. I called you and talked about the stuff I'd bought. You told me you were going to pick your favorite red sweater. I loved that sweater. It really hugged your curves. I felt better about the whole idea now that I was more prepared for it. We set a time that I would pick you up the next day and hung up the phone. I didn't sleep well that night. I was excited about the time we would spend together, and I was anxious that we would be spending it camping. I got up feeling less refreshed than I would have liked and drove over to your place. Your mother was out when I got there. You looked more excited than I'd seen you look in a long time. You had sparkle in your eyes and looked cute in your black woolen hat with pom-pom ears. You were every guy's dream girl. You wore your dark hair down and the curls bounced around your shoulders. We packed the car with your backpack and set off on our adventure. We drove for a few hours until we reached the forest and parked a little way inside amongst the trees. I felt uneasy about being too far from our transportation. You laughed and made fun of me, saying I was afraid of the bogeyman. I just unpacked our things and started to put the tent up, letting you have your 5 minutes of fun before you started to help. Eventually the tent was secured, and colder and somewhat wetter than I had hoped for, we unpacked our things and were sitting in the tent. Outside it was getting pretty dark because the trees all around us and overhead blocked out the majority of the daylight. We changed into some dry clothes and had food and settled in for the night. The rain was so heavy outside it found its way through the dense foliage above us and drummed the rhythm into the roof of the tent. You thought it was romantic. I was starting to remember how much I hated camping, but kept it to myself because I didn't want to spoil it for you. We spent the night telling ghost stories, your idea, not mine, until we were too tired to keep our eyes open and eventually fell asleep. I slept fitfully, despite being exhausted from the long drive, and woke up several times in the night. Each time I lay there listening to the rain hammering on the tent, the wind howling like a rabid wolf outside, thinking about how isolated we were out there. The tent offered no protection at all from any danger. You, however, were snug and sleeping like a baby. I reminded myself we had told ghost stories all night and put my anxiety down to that. The next morning you woke me up, excited because the rain had stopped, and started breaking open cereal bars for breakfast. I'd thought about boiling water over the portable cooking fire to make coffee, but you wanted to set out and explore while the rain had let up. You were so excited. You looked outside and saw the opportunity for adventure and fun. I looked outside and saw mud and grey light and felt irritated. I must be crazy to be here, I thought. It's only 5 days, I reminded myself. I must be tired. After this, it would be my turn to decide where we spent our next vacation, and it sure as hell wouldn't be in a tent in a bleak forest in the depths of winter. We finished our breakfast, did our bathroom duties in the great outdoors, and put on our ponchos, so if it started raining, we had some protection from it. We wandered around the forest for most of the morning, seeing the occasional winter hare looking for food. I was surprised. I thought everything would be in hibernation. Even with 2 pairs of socks on and gloves, my extremities were tingling from the cold. I never ever understood what you got out of traipsing through the gloom of that winter forest. We passed a couple of days like this, and with each passing day I could feel my irritation with you growing. You were bright and chirpy about the scenery and about seeing the occasional bird flying over looking for shelter from the freezing elements. I was less than enamored by the wet and bedraggled-looking trees, naked and pathetic in the miserable light. On the 4th day, things changed. I woke up from yet another lousy sleep, feeling like tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. You were hunkered down, legs crossed, surrounded by cereal bars, candy bars, and potato chips, beaming like a small child at a lucky dip. I sighed inwardly and gave you a somewhat forced smile as I reached for something to eat. It was 11 a.m. I had slept really late. You were babbling about some kind of animal you heard in the night and the candy bar you put out for it, which was gone when you woke up. Great, I thought. Our last night here will end with us getting eaten alive by some wild animal she's been feeding in the dark. We were in the middle of our breakfast when I heard a motor. What the hell? I thought. Why would anyone else be out here freezing their asses off? I felt uneasy, but thankfully our tent was well hidden and we weren't on the forest trail, and our vehicle was parked behind foliage, making it pretty hard to see. I had seen too many horror movies to allow us to camp in plain sight for all the world to see us. You really weren't that bothered by it. Probably some other campers, you squealed enthusiastically, and I had to explain to you why we weren't going to dash off and make friends. No common sense or self-preservation whatsoever, I remember thinking, with a lot more than just a small pinch of annoyance. We spent that day staying close to the tent, listening to vehicles driving back and forth and wondering what was going on, but I wasn't feeling brave enough to find out during daylight. We were miles from everywhere, we had no phone signal out here. I wasn't about to let either of us end up as missing person ads on the sides of a milk carton. Finally, darkness did fall and the bizarre traffic ceased. We heated some water and ate some noodles, and you decided we should spend our last night telling more ghost stories and then planning what we would do when we got back home. I was good with that. I was tired and going home couldn't come fast enough for me. It was late and we were talking about the assignments we both had due in a couple of weeks when another vehicle drove through the forest. The forest was quiet during the day, but it was even quieter at night because of the lack of birds calling. I peeked out through the tent and saw the headlights to a huge vehicle heading off into the forest beyond us. You grabbed a flashlight and took my hand, hauling me up, and insisted we head off to find out where it was going. In my head, all I could think was that it was the worst, most foolish idea you had ever had. But I had no choice except to keep up with you because we just went dashing off into the darkness. I almost twisted my ankle running after you and had to grab your arm to get you to stop. I snatched the flashlight from you and snapped at you that we didn't need to announce our presence to whoever was out there because there wasn't a hospital for miles. Whoever it was probably wasn't as friendly as the fairies that you had always joked lived at the bottom of your garden. I was seriously starting to have a problem with you at this point and wanted to snarl at you to stop running off like a little girl, but instead we walked forward in as much silence as we could, given that there were twigs, dead leaves, and mud everywhere, and tree roots to fall over. We walked a full 3 or 4 minutes, my hand cupped over the beam of the torch, which was pointed at the ground so we could just about see where we were going without alerting the whole forest we were there. We followed the sounds of other people and came to a razor wire fence. I almost walked straight into it. You stopped me. I don't know how you saw it, but I was grateful that you had. We crouched down and I couldn't understand what I was seeing at first. There was a clearing that started about 4 feet away from us and stretched for about 20 feet. Then the clearing ended at what looked like a run-down old building, a facility of some sort. What is that doing out here, I wondered. And what's it for? In the middle of the clearing was a bus full of people. The passengers were sat in their seats, staring straight ahead, not moving, like they were statues. I felt properly freaked out by now and just wanted to head back to the tent, zip the door flaps closed and pretend that we weren't there. The bus door suddenly opened, scaring the hell out of me from the sudden noise, and a man climbed down. He walked to the building and opened the door, stepped inside and closed it behind him. The people on the bus hadn't moved an inch. We really shouldn't be here, I thought. Something about this whole picture is very, very wrong. I turned toward you to say that we should head back, as whatever was going on here was none of our business, to find you trying to lift the razor wire and climb through the fence. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to shake you and scream in your face that proving your independence wasn't going to impress anyone if you ended up with a shotgun shell in your head, because the people running this place probably wouldn't take kindly to your intrusion. We had no idea who they were, or what they wanted, or what they were doing, and there was you trying to investigate like Nancy Drew with a death wish. He begged me to let you go to the bus and see what was wrong with those people. They haven't moved or made a sound since they got here, and the door to the bus is open, you argued in whispers. Eventually, just so we could stop making any noise at all, I agreed to let you take a very quick look, and I would keep watch. Though, what I would do if we got caught was anyone's guess. Pee your pants and run like hell, my mind thought traitorously. You crept across the clearing to the steps of the bus. I felt myself being pumped, full of adrenaline. Hurry up, my mind snapped. When we get home tomorrow, you can spend the rest of the vacation on your own. I am done with you finding yourself, I silently ranted at you. We are never going camping together again. You were on the bus now, and with the aid of the moonlight I could see you were walking down the aisle like a shadow, the only shadow moving on the whole bus. I felt the bile rising in my throat, and I could feel myself starting to shake. Despite the fact that you had passengers seated either side of you, not a single one of them moved even a fraction of an inch. Yeah, it was dark, but I could see their shadows. They may as well all be dead. That thought sent ice through my veins. Come on, come on, come on, I begged you silently. What's taking you so long? I saw the dark shape of your arm lift and then touch one of the passengers. What are you doing? My mind shrieked at you. The person you touched never so much as wavered, didn't lift their head. Nothing. Oh, God, they are all dead. They must be. I was almost beyond rational thought. Then you vanished from sight, and my heart almost stopped. You stood back up, and a surge of anger, born of fear, spiked through me. I was breathing in the icy air so fast it was making my lungs burn. If anything had have happened, I would have been no use at all. Finally, after what felt like an age, you turned and started walking back toward the front of the bus. Good, I thought. Get out of there so we can get out of here. I was almost crying. I was that afraid. How you managed to get yourself onto that bus, I have no idea, but we were in the middle of nowhere and there was a bus full of what looked like corpses outside of God only knew what kind of facility, and it was almost midnight. None of this should be happening. You slowly climbed down the steps of the bus and you were halfway across the clearing when the facility door opened again and the driver came back outside. You fell through the fence just as he got to the front of the bus and climbed back on board. You were trying to breathe as quietly as possible, but I'm sure the whole forest must have been able to hear us. He started the engine up and then drove it around the side of the building. I grabbed your arm and we headed back as quickly and as quietly as we could to the tent. I almost got us lost twice, but you kept us on the right track. I don't know how. My own reasoning was shot and I had trouble recognizing anything. I was so afraid. When we got back to the tent, I looked at you and the look on your face froze my insides. We crouched over the lantern, hiding the low light, because we were fearful of being seen, and in the darkness you told me what you had found. You said the people were alive. There were men and women and 2 children on board, and every single one of them was just staring mutely ahead of them. The passenger you touched never even looked at you, didn't even flinch when you poked them sharply to try and get a reaction from them. Nothing. I really wanted to slap you. I was so frustrated with you. What did you think you were doing, trying to elicit a response? We should have never have been there in the first place and had no idea what we were dealing with. And you were trying to make friends with Frankenstein's pets in the dark. You had a strange look on your face, like you wanted to say something, but I was so afraid and angry that I just switched off the lantern and ended the conversation. I wanted daylight to arrive so we could just leave. When morning did finally arrive, I turned to wake you. It was early, 7:30, and light was starting to show its pale face between the trees. You're laying on your side, looking at me with your dark eyes. Your face white. I was shocked. You looked sick. I asked you what was wrong, but you didn't reply. You just kept looking at me. Or rather, you were looking straight through me. You had one arm placed on your side with your hand on your pocket. I felt anxiety starting to coil itself around my gut, and I lifted your hand. It looked like there was a tube inside your pocket, and I carefully removed it. My stomach sank to my toes as I realized I was looking at a syringe. What the hell has happened? My shocked mind tried to think. I looked at you and asked you, what was in this? Did you inject yourself? Is this another one of your stupid proving yourself games? What is this? My voice was rising in pitch and I could feel tears welling in my eyes. You couldn't move and you weren't able to talk. Oh my God, you got this from the bus last night, didn't you? I grabbed the bottom of your shirt, yanked it up and looked for needle marks. I couldn't find any, so I lowered the waistband of your jeans, and there I found a red scratch against your pale skin. A needle mark. You must have somehow rolled onto the needle in your sleep and injected yourself. I panicked. I didn't know what was in the syringe, in you. All I knew was that we were not supposed to have seen what we saw last night. We were not supposed to have the syringe. You were breathing, and you were alive, but your eyes looked vacant. I packed us up. I needed to think. I bundled you into the car and I drove us out of there. All the way home, I tried to formulate a plan. I couldn't take you to the hospital. There would be too many questions, and facility people may come looking for us. I took you back to my home. I took you down to meet my parents at the family mausoleum. The police would search my house and my car, but nobody would search the mausoleum. I took a long, hard look at myself in the mirror, and tears ran down my face as I silently asked you to forgive me. I then filled a bag full of potatoes and tied rope around it. I looped it round the light fitting on the ceiling of the landing and threw the bag from me. It swung away, and then on its rebound it hit me straight in the face. The pain was instant and excruciating. My cheekbone was throbbing as I swung the bag away from me again. It came back, and this time I felt it break my nose. I did it 4 or 5 times, raising my arms at one point to give myself defensive bruising before I stopped. I cut the bag down, put the potatoes away. I went into the kitchen, doused the bag completely in bleach, and then filled it with rocks. I put it into my car and drove to the pond on the way into the town and threw it into the pond and watched it sink. Then I drove to the local police station, covered in my own blood and the filth from the camping trip, and reported you missing. I said that we had been attacked that morning in the early hours before dawn and you had been kidnapped. I had so many injuries that corroborated my story. The police believed me. I guess I was a good actor. They put out an APB and formed search parties to look for you. Searched my home and car as expected. I was taken to the hospital and treated for my injuries. Your mom was informed of what happened. Eventually, in time, the investigation became a cold case. Nobody responded to the posters asking for information on your disappearance. Nobody responded to the missing person ads of you on the side of the milk cartons. Nobody ever saw you again. Your mom turned to alcohol and died a few months later, drank herself to death. I went to her funeral. I figured one of us should, and you weren't able to. I put some flowers on her grave for you. I think you would have liked them. It was a bunch of roses and lilies. The roses for you, and the lilies for her. It's been years since those events. Years and years. It's funny how time passes and some things are ingrained in our memories forever. The clarity doesn't fade and the facts don't change. Things have just become more manageable. You look as beautiful as you always did, and I always dry your hair after I've washed it, into the style that you used to. I still dress you in your red sweater and you still look good in it. You still stare ahead of yourself, with a completely vacant look. It's okay if you don't remember me though, because I remember enough about us for the both of us. It's better like this. I don't know what kind of drug those people were trialing in that syringe, but it's really helped our relationship. You allow me to look after you now. You don't have a choice because you can't do anything for yourself, but I make sure to feed you pulped food so you don't choke, and you're clean, and you're well looked after. I've made the basement really comfortable for you, even though you just sit in your chair and never move or speak or do anything. I don't have to listen to you ranting about how you want your independence anymore, or mouthing off at me about how I never support your ideas or understand you. I don't have to listen to the cruel remarks you used to make about how I would never be good enough for you, and how you could do better any time you wanted to. There's none of that now. I can stroke your hair, now flecked with silver, but just as pretty, and hold your hand. I can tell you I love you, because I do. And I know you can hear me even if you can't respond. I can read to you, and we can watch movies together. I always make sure the TV is angled so you can see it, even if you do just stare straight through it. It's just you and me now. Forever and always. Just like it's supposed to be.